Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is Billy Brandt. On today's show, we're going to talk about the now infamous Jacob Stitch Duran and his firing from the Ultimate Fighting Championship. We will also dive into Bellator 140 and UFC Glasgow to recap those two events from this past weekend. And to top it all off, we're going to pick the four main card fights for UFC on Fox 16 from Chicago IL this Saturday on Fox Broadcast Television. Once again, as I said, I'm your host, Jim Graham. He is Big Shot Bill, my co-host. And how's it going today, Billy?
Really good. Got some good weather. Ready to talk about some fights.
Few things have fired me up in terms of wanting to talk about headlines than this Jacob Stitch Duran thing. And for those of you who don't know, Jacob Stitch Duran is a cut man for the UFC. He's the guy that applies Vaseline to make sure the cuts aren't bad and stuff like that. He's been doing this for many, many years, probably since I started covering the sport back in early 2008, and probably even before that. This dude has been a pillar of the MMA community and specifically the UFC. And he was noted by having his huge tap-out vest with his name Stitch on it, and most people consider him the best in the biz, or one of the best in the biz. And he had an interview with one of the big outlets here, Bloody Elbow, asking about the Reebok deal and what he thought about it. And he wasn't so much speaking negatively about it as he was stating what was happening to him under it, which again, under it, he wasn't allowed, much like the fighters, to wear any other company other than Reebok. And because of that, he's going to lose sponsorship money. In fact, probably more sponsorship money than most of the fighters, because under the current deal with Reebok, only the fighters get money from Reebok. The cut men, however, are not going to receive any money from Reebok. So they're going to get paid what they paid to be a cut man, and that's it. No extra compensation that he was already getting from wearing that tap-out vest and all the other sponsors on there. That's no longer a thing. So he was simply saying that he may have to go into boxing, which the fighter pays the cut guy, do some more boxing events, but he'd like to stick with the UFC because he likes doing them, and there's a lot of fights, and he has fun doing them. So the UFC, in response to this article on the Bloody Elbow, has decided to cut ties with Stitch, and he will no longer be used for any UFC events moving forward. Now, again, he wasn't saying the Reebok thing was a bad deal. He was simply stating a fact that he will not get paid any money from Reebok, but he will have to wear their gear, or at least not wear his sponsored gear, I should say, at the very least. So for the UFC to fire one of the best in the business who is not going to get compensated at all from this Reebok deal, and once again, he was never even consulted about the Reebok deal, or probably even really, I guess he did say he mentioned that he was going to lose sponsorship money on their deal, but I think that's kind of a cold thing, first of all. And second of all, he already thought about kind of doing some other events to make up for the loss of income. And now you're basically helping him do that easier because now you're getting a lot of bad PR by firing him. He's going to find a job in boxing or another MMA promotion like that, Billy.
Yeah, that's why I'm at least glad for him that I think he'll get picked up. And there's so much blown up about this that a lot of people see him and he'll find something new. But it's absolutely ridiculous from the UFC to cut this guy and, well, get rid of him because of that. Because like I've seen fighters post photos of like Reebok shoes in the trash. It go as far as to bash Reebok when he didn't even really take a stab at the company or nothing. He just said, well, there is better options out there now because he loses money.
Absolutely. I mean, how many fighters have we talked about since the Reebok deal being out against him? We've heard Aljamain Sterling. We've heard Miles Jury's the one that did the pick with the Reebok shoes in the trash. Brendan Schaub, probably the biggest opponent of this Reebok deal. He hasn't been fired. None of these guys have been fired. But Jacob Stitch Duran simply says, yeah, I'm going to make no money. I'm going to make, well, not no money. I'm going to make less money. I can't wear my own sponsors, and I'm not going to even get money from the sponsor that the UFC now has in place, that being Reebok. And again, he, much like the fighters, he is an independent contractor. He's not technically employed by the UFC. When the UFC goes to a commission, they're like, well, we're going to pay this guy. That's how they pay him. It's not like he's an employee or whatever. So technically, if Jacob Citroen only wanted to do 25 UFC events, 25 boxing events, that's completely up to him. The UFC can't stop him from doing that. So while it's kind of firing him, it's kind of not in the same token. But I think that in the wake, the reason happened so quickly, whether or not there's going to be a lawsuit or not, because he doesn't seem like the type of guy to do that. And like I said, independent contractor kind of makes it wishy-washy about services and whatnot. But you can't tell me that the UFC has no knowledge of this article and decides to let him go. You can't tell me that. There's no way.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's really no excuse for it. But like I said, I just hope we see him pop up in boxing events and he does well from here on out still.
Now, to me, this has to be a Dana White move. I don't see the Fertittas themselves pulling the trigger on this.
It could be. Man, it's hard to say. You never know, but it seems like something he would do.
I mean, it hasn't come out and said Dana White's firing him. Obviously, he can hide behind the company and said the UFC has decided to part ways with Jacob Stitch Duran. Right. I mean, his name doesn't have to be involved in it, but I don't know. It really irks me, and especially a guy. It'd be one thing if we've never heard of Jacob Stitch Duran or he hadn't been involved in UFC events for over 10 years and stuff like that. Probably people wouldn't be as outraged. But for as long as he's been in the sport, and then you get the article again where I got the article right in front of me. He's pretty much just stating facts. He's stating that he's going to lose sponsorship money. He's not saying, I'm so pissed at the UFC that I can't wear my vest now and make more money.
Yeah, he never took a straight stab at even Reebok or even said like, oh, this is terrible. He was just saying the way the deal's structured, he loses out on it.
All right, well, let's move on here. Let's get to Bellator 140, which, hey, maybe that's where he'll end up doing stuff for Bellator. Bellator 140, overall solid, but the main event, not what you and I expected, Billy. Just going over the main card real quick, Michael Page was able to get another first-round knockout over the Bellator whipping boy known as Rudy Bears. Then we saw an unfortunate no contest between Chris Honeycutt and Paul Bradley. Even though these guys are both known for wrestlers, I think that was shaping up to be a pretty good fight, and I think a win by either guy kind of would have propelled them up Bellator's welterweight ladder. A no contest doesn't really do much. Very unfortunate for both those guys in that one. Brendan Ward took on Roger Carroll, who, again, he had to take this fight on very short notice. I give him credit for stepping in there, but yeah, he had no chance against Brendan Ward, who I think is poised to possibly be close to a 170 title shot after already having a shot at the 185 title. And then Paul Daly, maybe a slight hiccup there in the beginning, but it was able to overcome that and roll on and knock out Dennis Olsen in the second round. Of course, he's trying to make his push for a Bellator title shot as well. But getting to the fight that was actually for the welterweight title, Andrei Korzhakov against Douglas Lima. You and I thought this fight was going to be fireworks. Two of the better stand-up fighters, not just in Bellator, but in the world, going at each other. And what we saw was a relatively lethargic Douglas Lima and, oddly enough, a grappling-prone Andrei Korzhakov that made for a rather uneventful 25-minute fight in what should have been a barn burner. And rumor has it that Douglas Lima suffered another injury and was close to pulling out of this fight, but Bellator told him don't do that. I don't know if that's true or not, but he definitely did not look like the same Douglas Lima we remember wrecking dudes with leg kicks before this fight.
Yeah, there's clearly something was up with him, and I mean, Korzhakov played it kind of smart, and he went more grappling mode to get the decision done. But I don't know. I had some high expectations for this one, and I feel like it kind of sucked because Bellator probably had a lot of people tuning into this with all the from the last event's hype and stuff feeding over. So, but luckily there was some good fights that started off, and I want to get into Michael Page too. It's kind of off topic, but I love this dude so much, and I love his style. But they need to start giving him legit opponents. Like, it's getting to be, I don't know how many wins he has in Bellator now, but they need to give him a top guy.
Well, I think what would be great for Bellator, Paul Daly is already set to take on Douglas Lima months ago at that British Invasion card. That kind of Lima pulled out of that one. They ended up giving Daly someone else, and now he's had 2 fights since that supposedly title shot. Now you can do Daly Korjakov for the title. I think you give Lima a break or someone kind of easy to get him back kind of into the swing of things, and then you can do Brennan Ward versus Michael Page for a #1 contender.
Yeah, I'd like that a lot. Just anything. They got to give him someone realistic. And then, yeah, Douglas Lima can get Rudy Bear.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Have him fight Rudy Bears. Just throw him in there. So, or honestly, it would be a big splash fight. Lima against Josh Koscheck.
Yeah, but I really think they're just going to make that Daly Koscheck fight.
Ugh.
I don't want it. And
I was not a fan of the first time around.
I've seen, I don't know if it was Daly or Koscheck. One of them said, like, if they made that fight, it would smash all the records. Kimbo Shamrock, like, come on.
No. I mean, it would do well, but it's not. Neither of those, even Koscheck is not even close to Shamrock and Kimbo.
Neither of them.
So. All right. Also, speaking of Bellator, they released a kind of computer image rendering of what the proposed Dynamite card coming up later this year looks like with the cage and the ring. And I don't know if both events, I say, in terms of matches going on simultaneously. I think they just did it for the artists, but they're going to have basically the section there of the HP Pavilion Center, which is normally used for hockey for the San Jose Sharks. It looks like the one kind of zone's going to be the cage. They're going to have a little split, have some fans, crossover fans there in the middle of both, and then they're going to have ring at the opposite end of what would be the rink. And that is the proposed layout. I think that's pretty cool, but you're obviously losing some fan attendance by having both things there. And I wonder if, I don't know what their conversion thing is, but I almost wonder if somehow they could have had like the events, then maybe like an hour break and then switched it. I don't know if that's possible or what goes into tearing down and whatnot, but maybe that would have been too costly or too quick. But if they do roll with both in the same rink and stuff, that should be interesting.
Honestly, I liked it a lot. I liked the way it looked. I thought it was a cool idea. It brings something fresh because me personally, I've been watching all those Glory events and loving them. So it'd be so cool to go to like a Bellator event also, and then you get a Glory kind of best of both worlds. And I thought it was set up fairly nice. I mean, I could see where it'd cause a little problems, but I like the way. I'm pretty excited for that.
Also, would have been cool if they could have maybe just for one event you just set up the ring and you do both,
Yeah.
or I don't know.
I do like
just to
the
switch
ring.
it up. I don't know.
I'm biased, but I like the ring a lot. I think it has like a more, I don't know, for like a fan, it's like a more open vibe, you know?
Yeah, it definitely has better sight lines, and obviously the angles are, you can kind of box someone in a little bit. You can't really do that with the cage.
Right.
So everything's pros and cons, but it'd be cool. Like, we don't know when he's coming back in terms of date, but that would have been a perfect thing to welcome Fedor back. Would to have an event that's half kickboxing, half MMA, and then obviously he fought so many years in the ring there in Pride. Maybe in the future, who knows? It depends how this one works, right?
That'd be awesome. If he could fight in the ring, even if they did an MMA fight in the ring, I'd love to see it.
All right, let's get to UFC Fight Night Glasgow from this past weekend in Glasgow, Scotland. The first event in the country for the UFC. Got to talk about the undercard for just a second. Obviously, one of the home country guys there, Rob Whiteford, he was able to get a great victory, knocking out Paul Redmond in the first round of the 304 marker. But I got to talk about Paddy O'Houlihan a little bit, one of the training partners of Conor McGregor there at the SBG team. And the reason this is important for us, we've got to interview Luis Smolka several times here on the show. Consider him a friend. Probably we'll have him on again before his next fight. But Paddy O'Houlihan actually called out Luis Smolka after his win here at UFC Glasgow, as he was able to defeat Vaughn Lee, another pretty solid flyweight by unanimous decision. And it looks as though our friend Luis has accepted. And of course, Paddy's looking to fight on that Dublin card October 24th in Dublin, Ireland. So it looks as though we're going to see Smolka versus O'Houlihan come Dublin.
Yeah, I like that matchup a lot, and I think is that Dublin card? Is that a Fox Sports 1 or is it?
You know, I'm not 100% sure yet. I would imagine it's going to be a Fox Sports 1 card, but it could end up being a Fight Pass.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's definitely if they do like a Fight Pass, maybe like a co-main, or maybe even they even run it because they're both on a pretty decent streak and being in Dublin. But or if it's a bigger card, Fox Sports 1 open the card up. Either way, I really like that matchup, and I'm excited to see it.
The first fight of the evening was at 155 pounds. This is another one of the Scottish guys, Stevie Ray. He took on Leonardo Mafra. And I tell you what, Billy, we thought this thing standing would be pretty even. You know, Mafra definitely known for his stand-up skills. But Stevie Ray, I don't know if it's all just him being better than Mafra or the roar of the crowd defending his home country, but I honestly thought he just put it to Mafra. I know the striking numbers are pretty even. You know, Mafra wasn't completely overmatched, but it just seemed like he really didn't have an answer for Stevie Ray, and he was able to land a lot of power punches, was getting Mafra rocked, and then eventually, just took one too many to the head, and Mark Goddard had to come in and stop this one. And Mafra was pretty close to being out cold, it looked like there, too. He got blasted, and this Stevie Ray guy, let me tell you, he's definitely great fighting in his home country, and I think showed a lot of people that he's a guy to look out for here, one of the young guys here at 155.
Yeah, as soon as I seen that Braveheart nickname, I knew something was serious about this dude. And then he came out and he really showed it, though. All joking aside, like, he looked ahead the whole time. Even like you said, the numbers are a little closer, but I always felt like he dominated that whole thing. And then he finished it big and got the strong knockout, which really surprised me. But look out for him in the future.
The next fight of the evening, which I believe was at 170 pounds, that was between Leon Edwards and Paul Palalik. And in this fight, Leon Edwards definitely won. I don't think you can really debate that. I think what you can debate is it seemed like he was really kind of tentative in this fight because I didn't see Pollock offering him much. Looking at the numbers, Edwards only outstruck Pollock 73-65. Both were 0 for 4 on takedowns, but it just didn't seem like the Polish fighter had much for the Brit. It didn't really seem like it seemed like he was getting stalked a lot. He didn't answer the grappling exchanges. He wasn't that weak, and it just felt like Edwards was, I don't know. I don't know if he was afraid of getting taken down or the power punches or what. It just didn't seem like he had that kind of extra gear. I mean, he had that big head kick there late in the fight. He looked close to finishing it. But other than that, I thought he played it pretty close to the chest. And I thought, considering the way Pollock was performing, I thought this thing was going to get over a lot sooner. Just for whatever reason, Edwards didn't really pull the trigger much.
Yeah, coming off Edwards' last fight, and seeing how much Pollock really offered, I did expect a lot more, and it seemed like he was cutting off the cage the whole time and on him, basically in control the whole fight. I was surprised he wasn't a little more active with it, but he did land that big head kick in the third, like you said, and I really thought that was going to finish him, but didn't get the finish. He gets the win. It wasn't the most exciting performance. I don't know how far I'll push him forward, but it's 2 wins in a row for him still. I'd like to see a lot more out in his next fight.
But again, we don't know if he had a nagging injury, whether the weight cut was difficult for him. You know, we don't know all the situations, but we know that he mostly trains still in England. Obviously, a short drive or flight if he decided to fly up to Scotland. So, I mean, most of the factors you think would be favoring Edwards. So, maybe it was just maybe he saw something else in some of Pollock's other fights that they maybe got him worried. But like I said, he got the job done, but I still think as a guy that can be a force to be reckoned with. I think you saw from that head kick in his previous fight in 8 seconds, this guy has some very dangerous power and is a very good stand-up fighter.
Yeah, 100%. And credit to Pollock because that head kick landed clean. I'm surprised he survived it all.
the next fight in the women's strawweight division, another one of the hometown fighters there, Joanne JoJo Calderwood took on Courtney Casey. And I tell you what, this one was definitely a brawl and ended up winning one of the Fight of the Night bonus awards here. And this was a great fight for two reasons. One, you had a lot of action, a lot of back and forth, good grappling exchanges. And two, you had a girl in Courtney Casey who took this fight on 2 weeks' notice, had never fought in the UFC before, flying from her training home right now in Hawaii all the way to Scotland in 2 weeks to take on a top 10 girl, the best girl she's ever fought in her career. You got to give all the credit in the world to Courtney Casey for taking this fight. And
not only that too, she brought a fight to her, like from the opening bell. She came after.
And that's the thing I was going to get at, is that is as much as, you know, Courtney Casey, I think, proved that she belongs in the UFC. I think we saw the next evolution of Joanne Calderwood. The reason I say is because if you look at her previous fights, not just in the UFC, in the Ultimate Fighter, but going back to Invicta, she's really kind of slow, methodical. She picks you apart. She's good at establishing range. You know, if you don't pressure her, she's going to beat you. But in this fight, we saw her not only take pressure for another time, but able to outlast it and persevere, and then turn up the pressure of her own, something we haven't really seen, punches and bunches. I mean, this was a 15-minute fight, Billy. Calderwood threw 303 strikes. If that's not turning up the tempo and turning up the pressure and answering to that pressure, I'm not sure what is, as she ended up outstriking Casey 227 to 106. This is the fight that Joanne Calderwood needed. This, to me, establishes that she can make a run in this division. You know, before her other two losses to Rose Namajunas and Marina Moroz, both times she got pressured quick and got submitted. And that had to play in her head, and this time, once again, she got pressured. But she was able to persevere and go out there and do a perfect strategy. She was able not only to stave off submissions, ground and pound, but just dominate and just throw and output and just wear down her opponent for this decision. And I'm definitely applauding Courtney Casey, but I think this is a huge step in the evolution of JoJo Calderwood.
It is, and I think she performed really well, but I'm still worried about her going forward in this division, because when Casey came forward, she landed a lot of big, clean shots. And when you get to the upper end of this division against someone like, I mean, even say Joanna, if you get a title shot, you're not going to be able to get away with that. You know, if she's landing them strikes, she still has problems when people pressure and come right at her, and she's going to have problems at the top. But it's a big step forward, and she definitely showed she can turn it on.
And Courtney Casey, I tell you what, a girl I'd like to see her take on next, I don't know if she has a fight, but could you imagine her against Kylan Curran?
That's that. Are they both coming off losses?
Yeah, because Curran had that, well, she should have won, but remember she got caught there by Alex Chambers.
It's still a perfect matchup for him then.
Yeah, that would be tremendous, because they both bring the pressure in, you know, full fight camp. So we'll see if that one materializes, but I think that'd be a great next booking.
This is a weird fight for Casey, where she sort of still wins in a loss. Like, she proved so much and everything was against her, and she came out there and made a great fight. So
absolutely. The next fight of the evening was at 155 pounds. Joe Duffy against Ivan George. And boy, this Joseph Duffy guy continues to be on a roll and continues to finish guys quickly, as he dispatched Ivan George in the first round. And really, this was kind of a pedestrian fight if you really think about it. Both landed them, you know, a couple strikes. Combined, they only landed 23 strikes. George was 0 for 2 on takedowns, but kind of in a scramble, which I don't think they credit for a takedown. Duffy had the legs up quick and was able to lock in a triangle choke before George could really react to what was going on, and he gets the tap of the 305 marker. And even though he has a lot of boxing ability and boxing skill and spent actually time as a professional boxer, I think a lot of people kind of just think of him as that. I think he proved that he has serious submission skills. I believe they said George was a black belt and had a lot of submission victories to his credit. And here's Joe Duffy submitting him with a triangle choke in the first round. We talked about Edwards being a guy moving up the rankings in 155. I think Joe Duffy is definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I think it's only a matter of time before we see him in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I can already see the promos now, the last man to defeat Conor McGregor, something like that. But this is a great win for him too, because I mean, that shows a whole nother part of his game. I mean, Ivan George is a tough dude to submit, and to pull that off it shows a lot. I mean, he's dangerous everywhere.
Yeah, and man, obviously, I'm pretty sure they're going to book him on the Dublin card. I think that's a foregone conclusion. Against two, man, I'm not sure yet. There's some fights with some pretty good 155ers coming up this weekend in Chicago that may interest him as well. And also, there's a pretty big one coming up in August with Dariush Johnson, and of course, the lightweight division's so deep. But those are some guys that I may be thinking of, because you got the likes of Lazone and Jim Miller and Takanori Gomi, Darren Cruikshank, James Krause, Danny Castillo. There's some good 155ers on the Chicago card, so possibly one of those guys could even fight him up. But we'll see. He's definitely probably going to get a main card spot there for Dublin.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of good fights you can make with him. And I mean, I don't want to say easy to promote, but because of that Conor McGregor thing, it's an easy way to sell him. And he's been performing in the fight scenarios too. So only good things ahead.
The next fight of the evening, also at 155 pounds, is Ross Pearson took on Evan Dunham. And I got to admit, Billy, I got to eat a little crow here. I thought Evan Dunham was pretty much done. I didn't really think he could do much to baffle the Brit, Ross Pearson. But 5 takedowns and outstriking the Brit 88-47 led to a unanimous decision victory for Evan Dunham. And I don't know if I just think the grappling just surprised Pearson. I don't think he expected to try to stave off 13 takedown attempts by Evan Dunham. I mean, he hasn't really shown that much going for the takedown probably in any fight. And if you look at tape at Evan Dunham, you expect more of a stand-up, some good leg kicks, him using the reach and whatnot. And that's probably what Pearson prepared for. However, Pearson has pretty good takedown defense and obviously did stop the majority of the takedowns. But when he got taken down, he was just getting in bad positions. He got the back taken twice. I mean, sure, he staved off the submission there in the first round with the choke and the nasty armbar. How he got out of that, I don't know. In fact, I thought he tapped. I thought I saw the hand go up, but
yeah,
boy,
there was hands I thought he tapped.
Yeah, I credit him all the world for staving off that, armbar. But it just didn't seem like he could get in the rhythm. And you got to credit Evan Dunham for breaking Ross Pearson out of his rhythm and being able, for the most part, control him.
Yeah, not only did Evan Dunham just take him down, but every time you see Pearson try to scramble to get to his feet or anything, he stayed on him. There was just constant pressure on it. Attacking submissions too, the armbar. He had his back for the whole first round. Pearson was in trouble from the start. And I mean, going back to that armbar, I don't know how much that affected him for the rest of the fight, but his arm had to be in some pain after that in that elbow, because that was in deep for a good amount of time. And credit to him for not tapping it somehow. I thought he did. But I think looking back too, actually, at Joe Duffy, that's actually a good matchup right here between Evan Dunham.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. And for Ross Pearson, I think this is kind of a setback. He's coming off that big win over Sam Stout. It seems like he's older than he is. He's only 30 years old. He still has a couple of years left in the sport. It's just the fact he's been around for so long. And this has to be disappointing for him. I know it's not technically fighting in England, but pretty damn close. And, he was definitely the favorite in this matchup. And not to say Evan Dunham's not good or anything, but it's got to be disappointing for him and definitely kind of a step back for him after making some headway, moving back down to 155.
Yeah, this is a tough one, too, because even like us last week, we kind of wrote Dunham off oh, yeah, Pearson will probably get a big win here or something. And when you lose those type of fights, it really hurts, especially when you sort of regaining momentum.
Let's get to the main event of the evening. Michael Bisping against Halas Leites in the middleweight division. I don't know if it's quite Lawler and McDonald too, but boy, I thought we saw a fantastic main event here in Scotland between these two middleweights that ended up going 25 minutes. Looking at the final tally, Bisping did outstrike Leites 117-80 and outthrew him 281-197. Leites was successful on one takedown. That was in the third. Didn't really hold him down there for that long. The striking numbers obviously paint a few more strikes for Bisping, but obviously the power shots and the damage and the closest to finishing this fight went with the Brazilian and Leites, who landed some nice power leg kicks and had some really nice overhand rights, and also had a couple nice uppercuts in the mix as well. And because of that power, I think that I probably would have gave this fight to Leites. I actually thought he had this 3-2. I thought Bisping had 1-5, and I thought Leites was able to win 2, 3, and 4. But when it came down to the judges, and it was a close fight, definitely a couple of those rounds, I think 2 and 3, you maybe could have went either way. So I'm not arguing the fact that Bisping won so much. I'm more arguing with the scores here. One judge did have it for Leites, 48-47. The other judge, 48-47, so 3 rounds to 2 either way. But the one judge, and I don't know how you could have scored this for either fighter, Billy, had it 4 rounds to 1 in favor of Michael Bisping. That being Mark Collett. That just blew my mind. And that's a huge, gross misfactor in this fight that gives Bisping the second judge and gets the win. And, like I said, it was a close fight. It was a fun fight. I really enjoyed it. Bisping was Bisping. He did what he normally does, but I just thought that the leg kicks really hampered his movement as it, went through this fight. And it seemed like also Bisping was a lot more labored than Leites, which you almost never see. I mean, Bisping was going over like this after like the 3rd and 4th rounds. I mean, I've never seen him do that. This guy has always been tip-top shape, and I think that you got to credit the damage that Leites was doing, who looked good to go. If there was any question about his conditioning, I thought he had one of the best performances he's had in his career. And, he gets the loss. I don't think it moves him that far down the rankings considering how close it was. But, boy, if this was like a main event title fight, Dana White would probably be saying, "Oh, we're going to run this one back." That's how close it was.
I like this fight a lot, and I gave it to Bisping. I think I gave him 1, 2, and I think it was round 4. I can't remember exactly because I know in round 3 he was rocked for most of the round. That was the most damage I think done in that round by Leites. But I think Bisping, it was more output, and that sways the judges reading me. I mean, he threw about 100 more strikes total almost. And just the output, he landed. I know Leites had a lot of strong leg kicks, but Bisping also had a lot of inside leg kicks of his own that were landing good. I mean, the most significant moments of the fight were probably for Leites, but I did overall like Bisping a lot in this fight. And I do, like you said, credit that he was looking tight or whatever. I think Leites landed some strong shots everywhere. There was one shot by Bisping I liked that was like I think it was a body kick in round 4. There's a huge body shot, but I gave him this fight, and now there's a lot of talk between him and Chris Weidman already. I mean, I think that's a little crazy. I don't think Bisping, he's got a long line, but hey, if he wins one more, he might finally get that shot he's always been hunting for.
Now, after his win, as much as I'd like to see a rematch, that's not going to happen immediately. I was kind of looking over the other top middleweights and kind of thinking, man, who does Bisping fight next? You look at the 2 guys at the top, Rockhold and Weidman. That appears to be coming pretty soon here in the fall for the middleweight title. It looks as though we're going to see Romero Jacare that we were supposed to see back on April for the next #1 contender happen in the fall as well. Machida's coming off back-to-back losses. Is that a highly attractive matchup for a guy now coming off back-to-back wins? I don't know. Then you look at Vitor Belfort coming off the loss of the title. He's already beat Bisping and very viciously was it. And also, there's also a chance Vitor may decide to retire. Anderson Silva is still technically listed in the rankings, but let's be honest, it's probably not going to be till next year or if he even fights again at all. So there's that. He just fought Talas Leites, who I believe was ranked 1 below him at number 10. He was number 9. That fight's already happened. CB Dalloway, I think, is 11. He just fought him, beat him. And then Gegard Mousasi, a guy you think would be the perfect guy to take him on, he's already taking on Ronan Canero coming up. And also Dan Henderson said he won't rematch Michael Bisping. So where does that leave Michael Bisping? The only guy I could think of, and the only guy not booked, is the young gun from Australia and Robert Whittaker. And I don't know how attractive that is to a 36-year-old Michael Bisping who's fought over 20 times in the UFC, taking on a young up-and-comer like Whittaker. I don't know how attractive that matchup is. It's the only one I can really think of, Billy, but Bisping's a guy that everyone always seems to want to fight. So, and also, again, he already fought and lost to Tim Kennedy. Another guy still ranked. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It went from having a lot of opponents to not that many very shortly for Mr. Bisping.
Even though he's coming off back-to-back losses, I think Machida will still do the most for him. I mean, yeah, it's so tough because Machida's coming off probably the worst losses he's had. He's been getting dominated, but it's still the best matchup. He's the only one ranked above him, I think, that he can get. So that's the best route, I think, for him, even though I think that fight will be trouble for him because if you're not going to put Lyoto on his back, he still has proved that he has it on the feet.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like I said, I just laid out some options. I thought if Mousasi didn't have that fight book, I think that would have been the perfect fight because either guy, then put one win away from getting a shot. But, like I said, Mousasi's already booked. As much as I hate to say it, I wish they could take Canero off that fight, make it Bisping Mousasi, and have Canero take on Robert Whittaker.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot better matchups for all of them, honestly.
But all right, well, let's get on to this weekend's big fight card, UFC on Fox 16 from the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. 4 fights will be shown on the Fox broadcast card, but boy, taking a look at this undercard that will be shown on FS1 as well as the UFC Fight Pass, boy, we got some fights here. We got Zach Cummings against Dominic Steele. We also got Jessamine Duke against Elizabeth Phillips. Ramsey Nijem will return. We have our hometown boy here, Darren Cruikshank, against James Krause. A matchup probably should be on the main card or pretty darn close. 2 top 10 bantamweights, Brian Caraway against Eddie Wineland. We also got Ben Saunders against Kenny Robertson at 170. Jim Miller, a longtime lightweight contender, against Danny Castillo. And then we got Gian Falante really rising here in the 205 division against Filthy Tom Lawler. I mean, I'll tell you what, if you just look at those fights I laid out, that's easily a all FS1 card on its own.
A main card.
Yeah.
There's not one fight on this card I'm not excited for.
So very excited, for all those fights. I'm looking forward to them. Of course, we'll probably get Darren here after the fight, as we usually do, talk to Mr. Cruikshank. We'll get him there, but very excited for that. And boy, this first fight of this main card might be the one I'm maybe most excited for. And this one actually was originally scheduled for the undercard, but with some things moving around, ended up bouncing up to the main card. And I don't know how you couldn't have had this on the main card to begin with, but we get it. Here it is. We get Joe Lazone against the last and only Pride lightweight champion, Takanori Gomi. And boy, this is just going to be a brawl. I mean, this is just going to be 2 guys really swinging at each other. I mean, Lazone's not great at takedowns. He is good at submissions and grappling. That, to me, is his best area to try to catch Gomi in a scramble, get it to the ground. If it stays standing, I think despite his last loss to Miles Jury, I think Gomi still has it. I still think he's the better stand-up fighter, possesses more power. And, Lazone's had a couple of iffy performances against Chiesa and Iaquinta in his last fight. He's definitely gotten rocked. And I would argue that Gomi has more power than even those 2 young bucks that Lazone previously fought. So this is going to be a brawl and the perfect fight to start off the night.
If this fight ends up bad, I'm quitting my job. There's no way that this one can turn out to be anything less than fight of the night. These 2 style, they're both going to come forward and just swing. Honestly, I don't think we'll see any takedowns unless maybe Lazone, he decides to play it a little safer. Maybe he takes a bad loss and he says, you know what, I can probably out-grapple this dude. I'll shoot it. But I don't think we will see that from him, and I think this will be just the best fight in a while.
And also, this is the reason it's a big fight for Gomez, because if he loses or loses badly, we can start to tell whether or not it's time for him to hang it up. But if he comes out there, has another brawl, survives, wins, you can still make a case. He's still got it. He can still fight. And
Yeah.
I think you can almost say the same way for Lazone, because I believe if he loses, that would be his third in a row. And if he gets knocked out, it'd be his third time getting finished. He's got to start to look at either changing up his style or possibly retiring himself, because even though he's a younger guy, Billy, these fights that he's getting in, you can't tell me those are not taking time off his career. I mean, he's every time he fights now, his face is a red mask. When's the last time he didn't bleed in a fight? Like, you got to go back years.
Joe Lozon's not fighting until he's cut. I mean, he's coming forward the whole time.
All right. Very excited about that fight. And the next one, I think, stays because of the excitement of this man here, and that being Edson Barboza, the Brazilian, as he takes on Paul Felder. Now, this is kind of a crazy situation, because this is originally supposed to be Anthony Pettis against Miles Jury. Anthony Pettis gets hurt. Edson Barboza steps in, so it's Barboza against Jury. Jury gets hurt, and Paul Felder steps in. And now we have a completely different matchup, Paul Felder against Edson Barboza. And Paul Felder, yes, undefeated in his career, known as the Irish Dragon, 7 of 10 wins by knockout. So far in the UFC, has looked awfully impressive, 2-0. Was able to defeat Jason Sago, and then his last fight, has that huge spinning back fist knocking out Danny Castilla, kind of shocking the world there with a big upset. Edson Barboza is coming off kind of a disappointing performance against Michael Johnson. Before that, had great wins against Evan Dudham and Bobby Green. And really, for Edson Barboza, I don't know if Paul Felder can implement what Michael Johnson did, and that's great footwork backed up by a lot of output. If he can do that, and obviously pressuring him with the footwork is what I mean. If he can do that, that's kind of what Bobby Green did to him, and obviously Michael Johnson was able to take that step one further and have the output and attack behind it, and that's why he lost that fight. And if Paul Felder can do that, he can win. But otherwise, if you're sitting back, you're not really pressuring him, you're allowing Barboza to move in space, you're not going to beat this guy. It's been proven. That's not how you beat Edson Barboza. And if you can't track him down with your footwork, you're going to get knocked out. That's plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, you got to put constant pressure on him and constantly be moving. I mean, you can't just be in his face. You have to be throwing, because that's what Bobby Green tried and it didn't work. You have to be constant output, constant pressure. If you take a step back against Edson Barboza and you give him his range, he's going to find a huge shot and he's going to land it. Everything he throws is just anything from his kicks, punches. He's going to land them and they're going to be hard. So there's not much you can do. The game plan's pretty simple. Just don't give him room to breathe. Don't let him have his range.
And I hope that's something he's been working on, because he's been training with one of the best footwork guys in the game, being Frankie Edgar. See, I got to believe after 2 fights of, going 1-1 and kind of losing to the guy with the better footwork and with the output there with Johnson, you got to believe that's been the main part of his training camp for this fight. Regardless whether Felder can implement it or not, is trying to counter that with either circling, push kick, clinching up more readily with takedowns, whatever the case may be. Something hopefully change in this camp for Barboza, because if he can, figure that part out, how to counter that movement, which obviously we've already seen 2 guys implement and probably more, he can definitely become a champion. Because to me, that was about the only hole in his game. Everything else he does very well.
Yeah, I mean, because it got exposed, I got to imagine that it's the biggest thing, because it showed that it can have success in both fights. Even the one he won, it still showed it caused a problem for him. So I got to imagine that's the main thing he's focusing on.
In the co-main event of the evening, we get a huge matchup in the women's bantamweight division, as former title contender Miesha Tate will take on Jessica Eye. Looking at Miesha Tate, she's coming off 3 straight victories since losing to Ronda Rousey once again. All of them, however, by decision decision, beating the likes of Liz Carmouche, Rinda Kai, and most recently Sarah McMahon at UFC 183. Looking at Jessica Ai, she's coming off a very dominant performance over Leslie Smith. We saw her knockout Smith in the second round at UFC 180 last year, and this is a big fight for Jessica Ai. If she wins, she most certainly gets a title shot in this division. If Tate wins, I don't know if it's 100% the same because she's already lost twice to Rousey. But if she beats Ai and goes 4 straight victories, beating, like I said, already beat Carmouche and McMahon, now beats Jessica Ai, she at least has a case to try to get a three-peat Rousey. But, this is the best girl I would say that Jessica Ai has faced. A girl that's known for constant pressure with the takedown, a very strong top game, and a lot of output when being on top. And if Jessica Ai can keep this thing standing, that's her best chance. I think she has the better footwork. I think she has the better movement, has a really good jab. But if Miesha Tate gets on top of her, that's not good. That's not where she wants to be.
Yeah, if Jessica Ai wins this fight, she is in a title contender spot. But for Miesha, the only way she can get another shot, she has to be as dominant as Ronda. She has to literally go out and destroy someone. It's going to be so hard to get that third shot. So I don't know if for her just kind of going out there, putting you on your back, getting that decision, I don't know if that's going to do it. So I think she needs to pull out something a lot more to really prove she gets that third fight. And the keys to win, really, Jessica Ai, like you said, I think if she stays on the feet, we've seen in her last fight, there's not many people I'd pick against her. She looked really good, put a lot of output, and I think she wins it there. But if she can't defend the takedown, she's going to be in some trouble.
Looking at the main event of the evening for the UFC Bantamweight Championship for the second time, Renan Barão against TJ Dillashaw. These two first met back at UFC 173, which saw Dillashaw knock out Barão midway through the fifth to capture the Bantamweight Championship. Since then, Dillashaw has had one defense at UFC 177, knocking out Joe Soto again in the fifth round, almost at the same time he knocked out Barão. 220 for Soto, 226 for Barão. So almost eerily similar performances, but the rematch again was supposed to take place there at UFC 177. Couldn't happen then. Was then supposed to be the main event of UFC 186. Couldn't happen then, but now we finally get it here. UFC on Fox 16 here in Chicago, and the story of this fight is, what is Barão going to do differently? TJ Dillashaw has gotten to the point, maybe a Nick Diaz or a Bisping sort of style where he has great cardio backed up with great takedown defense. He's able to back it up with good footwork and pressure with a lot of punches and bunches, not necessarily one-shot knockout power, but just keep coming at you with a variety of different percentage strikes in terms of 75% power, half power, 25% power, and he just keeps on building to you, and then he'll start to lay on you with some power ones and knock you out, as kind of he's proved in his last two fights. And for Barão, in his win there against Mitch Gagnon, he got the win. He beat him, don't get me wrong, but I didn't see anything that goes, oh, this guy's ready to defeat TJ Dillashaw. And for Barão, probably the better submission guy. I hate to say you want to pull guard on Dillashaw, but he's got to do something to create a scramble. He's got to be constantly circling and throwing a lot of leg kicks. Even if he gets taken down, that's maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but trying to slow down the movement with some leg kicks. And that's really how I see him trying to counter the constant pressure. Because I don't think clinching with him is necessarily a great idea, because I think Dillashaw is bigger and stronger than him. But I don't know, maybe it's also a mental thing, with the delays and the injury and already beating him once. I just think that Renan Barão has much more to do in this fight than TJ Dillashaw does.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be near the same at all. I think Dillashaw caught Barão early in the first fight, and it kind of caught him off guard, and he took control of that fight. Don't get me wrong, dominated, but I think this fight will be a lot different for Barão's side. I'm not completely sold on Dillashaw. I mean, he's really good with his output, pressure, all that stuff, but he still ate a lot of punches in that Joe Soto fight, and that worries me when you fight Barão. And Barão's he expects he expects it now. He knows what's coming. And oh man, I don't want to give my pick away too much, but I think this fight will be really different for Renan Barão.
With that said, let's get to picks. UFC on Fox 16, starting first with the matchup at lightweight between Lazone and Gomi. Boy, just super excited about this fight. Probably the most excited one I'm on the card, but I'm going with Takanori Gomi. I think his takedown defense will be good enough to stop Lazone in the scrambles, and I just think overall he's still the better striker, even now in his mid-30s. So give me the Fireball Kid to win this one.
I like Joe Lauzon here. I think he catches him on the feet, and then he finds a way to get a submission.
The next matchup of the evening, also at 155 pounds, Edson Barboza against Paul Felder. I do think Paul Felder is a good up-and-coming guy in the division, but I don't think he's ready for someone the caliber of Edson Barboza yet, so give me the Brazilian in this one.
Man, this one's tough. I'm going to pick Edson Barboza, but you never know with Felder. After that last knockout, it might be his time, but I like Barboza for now.
Co-main event of the evening, Jessica Ai against Miesha Tate. Oh, man, this is a tough one.
I don't know what to do here.
You know, she got taken down by Alexis Davis a bit. She was able to get her up to her feet for the most part. I think she knows that Miesha is going to be working the takedown. I think she's been working takedown defense a lot in her camp. I think she's going to be ready. I'm going to go with Jessica Evil Eye to win this one.
Man, it's tough. I think Miesha wins a decision.
The main event of the evening, TJ Dillashaw against Renan Barão for the second time for the UFC Bantamweight Championship. As I said, Barão still has a chance to win. I just think that he won't be able to do enough to stop the man people have been calling Killishaw. So give me Mr. TJ Dillashaw to retain his title in Chicago.
Man, we're picking opposites this whole card about. I think Barão not only wins, but I think he finishes him. And I could be way wrong on that, but I'm going to go with Barão here with the big finish.
All right. Anything else to add here before we end this week's show, Billy?
Nothing much. Just don't fail me, Barão.
All right. If you haven't seen already on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, I put a post on there showing a nice signed photo of Jessica Ai and Sam Alvey. But in order for you, the listener, to win such a prize, we got to get our Facebook page to 400 likes. Last time I checked, we're about 17 likes away from 400. So go to our page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, like it, share it. Once we get to 400 likes, we'll start a contest giveaway, and you could win a signed photo from Jessica Ai or Sam Alvey. So please do that again, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. He is Mr. Billy Brand. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And thank you once again for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.